So first I'm going to show you guys the sheet that you're going to fill out, and you will see it does not give you very much information. It's not specific to anything except that it's talking about sculpture. Okay. So first of all, for this project, you can do anything as long as it is a sculpture. My students in class, the hardest thing for me to teach online is sculpture because I have no idea what you guys have at home available. So my students in class last week, and we're testing them out today, created these marble runs. Okay. And then this week, they will be, tomorrow they start bobbleheads with Sculpey, which is a kind of clay that it's plastic based.
And it dries.
Yeah, this one we cook in the regular oven.
It's a different type of Sculpey.
Yeah,
I know
there's air dry clay too. It doesn't quite work as well for
Sculpey. There's air dry
bobbleheads.
clay, and there's Sculpey air dry, which a lot of people like using.
So these are things that you could make too, even though I'm not necessarily what the stuff that I'm showing you. You can make with any kind of like stuff that you have. Okay. So
I see a mosaic there. Is that a sculpture? Mosaic's a sculpture?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Not really, but.
I mean, that's something I was really confused about because I saw the mosaic and I'm like.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second. So first I want you guys to answer, you could answer out loud by unmuting, or you can write it in the chat.
A sculpture is a 3D image.
Yep. Anybody else
So
have
you
anything to
technically
add?
do a digital sculpture if you have the techniques and advanced skills to do that. But
yeah. What are some other ideas from the rest of you about what sculptures are? V, I think that's a great idea to ask for that for your birthday. So Grace is right in that it's 3-dimensional. Okay, Anaya, yep, you're right. It's 3-dimensional, which means that it has, you know, a front, sides, a back, a top, a bottom. Okay, instead of 2-dimensional, which theoretically, like you could argue that this is a side as well. Okay, but it's flat. Okay. Yeah, great, Soraya. You're right too. So whatever if you choose to build your sculpture, okay, it's going to be 3-dimensional where we can see all sides, which means that on the sheet, you might have to turn in more than one photograph. Okay. Or for other things, people, or for past projects, people did a little video and then included that link. Okay, just make sure that whatever, if you include a link, that it's open for anybody with the link to see, because otherwise I can't grade it. So you can choose to actually build a 3-dimensional sculpture if you have materials for that. Okay, you could use cardboard, you could use clay, you could use paper mache, Grace brought up. You could use found object sculptures. So like, why it's not letting me out.
I also saw in one of your images you had sand art. Would that even be considered a?
We're gonna talk about that in a minute. Too. One thing I wanted to show you when I was saying found art sculptures. So, these, like this image here that you're looking at, the shadow is made from the reflection over these shapes, and you never would think that that would happen. Okay. Same for all of these. That weird looking sculpture, the shadow makes these kind of things. So you could try something like this, okay, too, with found object, or you can take the found objects and put them together in something. The options that I put together in the presentation, okay, I was trying to pull together some ideas that anybody would have these kinds of materials around the house, okay? So for that, I don't mean that you all have colored sand, okay, at your house. Absolutely not. And I would also argue, Grace already brought this up, that this is by itself not actually a sculpture because it's thin. It's not that tall. Okay. These are mandalas. And I have a video. Where's the video at?
I mean, personally, I think they're a good piece of art, but
yeah, they're beautiful and they
cult.
take a super long time.
I mean, they almost look like a mosaic.
Yeah, absolutely. They look like mosaics. So these are Tibetan monks, and these are created as a prayer. Okay. So the fact that they take a really long time. So what they're doing is they have these sticks that are like concave, so that they put some sand up here and then they tap it with this other, it looks like an upside down screwdriver to me. They're tapping that so they can control how much comes down into the design. Okay. Just looking at them makes my back and my knees and my legs hurt really, really bad. Okay.
I'm also thinking, how do they not mess it up?
Yeah.
How do they not knock it over?
Or like,
I'm so clumsy that I would knock it over in a heartbeat.
Right? If they sneeze, if there's like a breeze that comes by, it's gone. Okay. So they often do these outside, not like in the middle of a field, but like outside where it's probably a little protected, but still you've got all those elements. It's as soon as it's finished, it's probably photographed, all of that, but it's swept up and it's gone. Okay. Because it's created as a prayer. So it's not permanent art. So another thing that you could do, thinking of not permanent art, for sculptures, you could go outside and create something like that. This artist, Andy Goldsworthy, creates art with found objects outside. So like these are all leaves. These are all sticks he found. These are all rocks. Now, for our purposes, you know, you'd want to make it a little taller to make sure that it's a sculpture. This, I would argue, is still two-dimensional with the leaves on the ground. Okay. Now, if you piled those up and made the mounds of leaves, now that's three-dimensional. Okay. Does this make sense to everyone?
I mean, yeah, I was looking at this. I'm like, some of these are sculptures, like the one where he made that circle, almost looking like a crown. I would argue that that's a sculpture, but the one where he has that little like snake circle, I would argue against saying that is not sculpture.
Yeah, and so something like this, where you can go through it, you can interact with it, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a sculpture, but then I keep losing my stuff. Where did it go?
Like the one with the rippling water.
What about this one? Is this a sculpture? What do you guys think? This one here, the tree one. I'm pointing at my screen.
You could argue it both ways. Technically, in my viewpoint, it wouldn't be, because what he did was he took a photograph of it and then just traced the outlines with a gold marker. And so it looks gorgeous.
It's not a gold marker. It's leaves that he's gathered. So he photographed
that's impressive.
It.
But still, again, I don't consider that as a sculpture.
Yeah.
Because he didn't physically move the tree there.
Yeah. Okay. So then that gets us to another question that I'll come back to in a second. Parker, you said it is a sculpture. So why are you saying that this one is a sculpture? And I bet some other people think that it's a sculpture too. So. Are you typing, Parker? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. You were looking at a different one. Anybody want to argue that this is a sculpture here? This tree one? Okay.
I could argue it both ways.
Yeah. Though. I would say that this is a sculpture because it's not just, so like here, it's just what the leaves are on the floor, but this one is interacting. Yeah. So
I started to think about it and I'm like, I could argue it both ways.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And you know what? Good art should make you like have an opinion and make you want to talk to someone about it and like freak out or get mad or be excited or whatever. Anaya is saying if you count the tree as part of it, as part of the sculpture. So yeah, I would count the tree because he's not just making this line.
I thought it was like a digital thing originally. That's kind of why I was like, that's not a sculpture. Yeah. And then finding out that he did this with leaves, I'm like, okay, that's kind of a sculpture now.
Making this digitally would be so much faster. I tried to make one of these last spring, and I had this like vision in my head. And then when it came time to collecting all of the dandelions, I just, I didn't have the time to make it look cool because I also didn't have a mower then to make the grass the same length and like, you know, all of these things that if I was working in my own yard instead of at a park, I could have controlled some of that more. But this is a lot of time spent. And then all that he's left with for most of these is just the photograph documenting it. Yeah, a slight breeze and it's gone. And even a slighter breeze, or like my dog coming along and taking one of the sticks that you're using and eating it, you know, like it's just, it changes over time.
Yep.
So that is another option, but you want to make sure, okay, so I'm showing you this example here, but you want to make sure that it's more three-dimensional than this, okay, to make it a sculpture. Where is, so the idea if you did something like this, okay, is to use found objects. Okay, these are examples I just pulled off the internet. So they're actually using forks and a bowl here. Okay, they're actually using candy here. That's three-dimensional. The one that I would say is a little problematic of being three-dimensional is the money.
Yeah, it's the pennies. That's kind of what I was looking at. I'm like,
They're
that's not really
super thin, and so not much dimension to them. That would work if you like piled them up. So made like,
that'd be cool though if someone piled it up.
yeah, you could have them be like maybe 5 pennies and then 3 nickels, so that would, they would be at different heights. That would be really cool. You're not, it says week 9 there. I didn't edit this clearly. But you're not permanently destroying anything either. You use it and then you could put it back to where it came from. Okay. So another option that I'm showing you specifically, we kind of talked about that question already, is Alexander Calder. And I've got some videos here that you guys can watch later. It sounds like people are having internet problems, so I'm not going to try to show them now. Alexander Calder is a really amazing artist, and he did these huge sculptures that you've probably seen.
I can't figure out what that red one's supposed to be. I see different animals in it.
Yeah, they generally are animal-like, and he doesn't identify like in the title.
I can see multiple animals in it.
Yeah, he doesn't.
And it's frustrating not knowing which one it is.
Yeah, he doesn't say bug or cow or, you know, anything in the title. It's just usually it's not identified. He also makes these really cool mobiles. Okay. Now a mobile is a little tricky because like, look at this one that's touching his face here. And even this one, these parts are flat. Okay. They're pieces of huge metal, but they're flat on themselves. You could collapse that mobile down and it's now 2-dimensional. Okay. But when it's hanging like that, it's 3-dimensional and it's kinetic, which means it's moving. So that's you know, it's changing all the time, things like that. Okay. So then it becomes a sculpture. It's kind of both, depending on if you're like displaying it or if it's on the table in a way. Okay. So one, you could build a mobile. We did some, one time my kids were bored when they were little, my older 3, and we did some that we just used, they just found like little treasures and we used hangers and like tied them, and there's a balance to it and things like that. But you could also make drawings and have those make those into a mobile. If you're going to make a mobile, that's something that is going to be easier working at home because you can leave it set up. So if you work on it for a little bit, you can leave it set up and come back to it. And when we've tried to do those in my room, it doesn't work because there's too much fixing and setting up time every day.
I mean, it wouldn't work in my house because I have 3 cats. You think they own the house.
Yeah.
And 2 of them would knock down anything.
My cat.
They haven't tried glass yet. Thank God for that. But
good.
It's only a matter of time.
So I put this other question in here. How do artists and designers learn from trial and error? What do you guys think for that?
Well, because in my experience, when I do art and when I fail, I'm 10 times more determined to figure out where I failed and where I can succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Soraya wrote a very similar thing in the chat. you learn from failing. So like with the marble runs that my students did in class, they had to, test out the run and see if the marble was actually going or if it was getting stuck in different places. If it works the first time, you don't really learn anything because you didn't have to think about it again. Okay. It's in that like having to think about it another time or look at it a different way to problem solve and how you learn. So here's another example. This picture that's right here. Okay. It's hard to tell, but that's a project that my students did about 10 years ago. All of these dots are actually bodies. Okay, so there's about 800 people that were out on the football field, and we crouched down and made this image, and then someone flew over in an airplane and photographed us. Okay, but it worked. Okay, so we had like thought through and tried to problem solve as we went as to like what we could predict was going to happen. And it worked, which is great because we wouldn't have been able to get an airplane to do it again and all this other stuff. But the evaluations for it were just like all kinds of different variations on like, oh my God, I can't believe it worked. Okay. But there was no processing and reflection in the evaluations because it worked. Okay. The next year we tried this other thing where we constructed hundreds and hundreds of paper airplanes, and we hung them off the front of the building, kind of like a Christo installation. And our trial run where we put one like line of them up there worked great. So Christo is an artist who does these installations where like this entire building is draped in fabric, like it's just covered up. Okay. Or he outlines different land masses, or this is a huge fence just running off a landscape, but like huge, not just one person's property. Things like that. I know, that's a good question. I don't know where he gets all the fabric either. And he's also had to adapt because as people start to care more about the environment, things like something like this island thing, he's had to work with like engineers and stuff about scientists coming up with ways he can do his projects that don't hurt the animal life or the environment that he's putting them in.
I'm glad he cares about the environment.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. Like think about this one guy's idea for artwork is making all of these other creative things happen that can like have.
He could do biodegradable algae and then use root juice as a dye for the pink.
Yeah,
which is all
absolutely.
something that'd be safe for the ocean.
So for that one though, when we actually went to install the projects, the paper airplanes on the front of the school, the wind took every single one of them on top of the roof. Okay. So it absolutely failed. We thought we'd done everything and it failed because of the wind. We didn't think about that at all. So the evaluations, students like did all of these, thought all of these different creative ways about how, if we could do it again, how would we do that better? And how could we change our design and how, all of this, some like crazy things where we couldn't have super glued them to the building. Okay.
Well, you could have used Model Magic from Crayola, stick that on, let that dry. But then with Model Magic, you could just spray the hose down and it would start dissolving.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's all kinds of more creativity came out of the project that failed than the project that worked. Okay. So that's why trial and error is so important. So if you decide to do the mobile, for sure, you're going to have a lot of trial and error because of the balance and all things like that. Okay. Calder also does these, the sculptures. So instead of building a big sculpture, you could try out, I've got some links here, these little, create little paper sculptures. And then when you photograph these, I want you to think about the shadows that you're casting too. That's a good question. Anaya just asked if they can do something in Minecraft. I would prefer that you're actually doing something that is three-dimensional, okay? But if you have no supplies to do anything that is three-dimensional, which some people might not, okay? From seeing how students' scissor cutting abilities in class, I know that it is very likely that in a lot of homes, students would not be encouraged to cut paper up, okay? Because some students just aren't very good at it, which make me think they're not having practice at home, okay? So if you have no opportunity to make something three-dimensional, okay, you could build a sculpture in Minecraft, but it needs to be obviously something that comes up from the ground, okay? Not like recreating the paintings where those were flat, most of them. You could also draw out, so like if artists are doing a proposal for a for a sculpture, then they are going to have to draw that out, probably have to make a little mock-up too, but it starts with, the first process would be you're submitting a drawing of what you want to build. So something like this, okay? And then if you get through the first round, you would be submitting a prototype, so a smaller version, okay? Does this make sense to everyone?
Yep.
So you're building an actual sculpture, or it could be, if you can't build a sculpture, an actual one, you'd be doing a design of a sculpture. Okay, so drawing it out, showing me like, I'd also like to know, where do you think it would go? Best, all of this.
I'm only realizing that.
Yes, Soraya, it is due Friday at the end, Friday at midnight. If you decide to do paper mache, Grace brought this up earlier.
I'm now realizing why I kept delaying it.
Yeah, you
Because
can do.
There's a lot of steps because you need to get the paper that you're gonna rip up to make the object, but you also need to make a paste instead of flour and water, which seems like it's a process.
Yeah, the flour and water paste, because you are at home, okay, so you'll want to like do a layer, and they're crisscrossing layers, okay? If you do paper mache, you'll want to do a layer, let it dry, do another layer. So you kind of just keep going back to it. Since you're at home, you can do that. You know, you could get your layers done potentially, you know, in a day or 2 days, okay? You do not want flour and water to sit around for very long at all. Right now it's humid. Even a day of it, might go moldy, okay? And it smells really bad. So if you do not have air conditioning on at your house, mix up just a little bit of flour and water, okay?
It says you want to do more water, like you want to water down that flour a lot.
Yeah, so yeah, start with water and add a little bit of flour to it. You can whisk it up, but don't leave it sitting out if your air conditioning is not on. Right now it's so humid, it's going to be moldy, smelly the next day.
It says to store it tightly in the fridge. So you have to put you know, you want to put plastic wrap exactly where it is so it does not have the chance to mold or have any airspace.
Yeah, but outside it will mold overnight if you're not air conditioned right now because of the humidity. Okay.
I have another question about paper mache.
Yes.
So how do people get the shapes? Do they
So you'd want to build an armature.
Which is
it's like a skeleton. So this guy is a little hokey. Okay. He's building up crazy, amazing projects. Let me turn this down.
Oh, so he takes.
So yeah, depending on what you're going to build, like he just made his armature out of newspaper, and then now he's cutting it open because he wants the mouth to be open so we can't have stuff in it. Okay.
So people just stuff it with random stuff.
Yeah. You could also, if you have like a lot of Walmart bags, you could use that as your armature to build on. You could use a balloon. It depends on what you want to make. Okay.
Okay.
And this guy gets past paper mache for the teeth and stuff. He's using like gauze, and here he's using gauze as well over the top of the main layer.
Well, I mean, gauze could technically count.
Yeah, it's just more expensive. It's fun, but it's more expensive.
Well, I mean, this guy seems to be doing it for a living, so.
Yeah. Does anyone tinfoil and wires. Yeah, sometimes that's the armature too, and that's actually what, like, if you were going to do a stop motion animation and put clay over it, that's what the armature would probably be in there too. For your assignment though, you are going to build any kind of sculpture you want. I've given you a couple of ideas for that. It needs to be 3-dimensional. Okay. If you cannot build a 3-dimensional sculpture, an actual 3-dimensional sculpture, you are going to then do a design showing me like multiple sides of it. And the same for your photograph of your project. You'll probably have to give me more than one photograph to show me the whole thing. Okay. I'm going to skip through to the end so I can show you guys the
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
I'm sure that sold for a lot of money, and I'm sure it sold quick.
Yeah, multiple layers of painting there too. Okay, so I've given you like some guidelines here for the two options that I've given you. That is not the thing I wanted to show you. This is it. And then on the project sheet, you're going to tell me what you made. It might be more than one photograph, probably will be. Tell me how you made it. So did you use paper mache? Did you, like, what materials did you use? Things like that. And then why did you choose to create that particular sculpture? So why is it a cat? Or why did you use clay? Or whatever, whatever relates to your project. Okay.